Gia Diva Harja, Gaeilge Gamer and Shaw, agus aniu tá mé ag immert Jack the Ripper, Sean Fischliha on ZX Spectrum ó ní jeg octo sa seacht, agus dus beire Yanni mé réora an grúpa a rinn an cluiche seo, mar scéal fíor himúlatáin agus tá sé bonithe go ddíra an seo hí nun an áil. Bhí sé deanta ag St. Bride's School, nó the Silver Sisterhood, a bhí an tainium cultus rún díora a bhí an in Ailte Háran i nun an áil sna hochtaidí, agus bhí siad ag caiithú a síl go sean amseartha le héadaí Victoriacha acu, agus iad ag seacaint an dóin nua amseartha go thomlin, seachas go raibh duine acu ag cruthú físclaithe sa te ag an am céanna rundiora atá ar fad a bhí ar siúil sa te seo. August, I'll say a quick note about the name St. Bride's School in English because it's about my pronunciation in English. When I first started researching this subject, I thought that foreign journalists were mispronouncing St. Bridget, but then I found interviews with Marianne, who started the school, and she's English herself, and she pronounced it St. Bride's School. Even though Niamh Bríd is clearly who the name comes from, she named it St. Bride's School, and that pronunciation seems to have stuck. So I'm sticking with her incorrect pronunciation because that's the name that was given to it, even though it's not the correct Gaeilge way to say it. Cabe B, ní bheith mé sa fís an seo ag díriú an grúpa héin, ach ma bhíonn sim agéibh níos mó a ólam faoin grúpa seo, tá fonsaí a bhuair mé a tá galanta fad. Alt a scríú Owen Williams i Retro Gamer an seo, agus srai atá deanta ag Radio Ulster leis an podcrílú Assume Nothing, tá go leor hagalamh simúla sa srai sin an ábhar, ach mé héin sa fís an seo bé mé ag díriú Priscilla Langridge, an duine sa grúpa a bhí ag scríú an na físclaithe agus an físclaithe seo go háirithe. Mar sin maidir le Priscilla agus na físclaithe an príomh ceist atá agin na cén fa gur thur an cultas tús le físclaithe a scríú nuair a bhí siad ag caiithú a síl mar Luddites gan nua technoliacht bí. Agus tá legan amháin den scéal seo san alt Owen Williams a luí mé níos luithe na gur tháinig Priscilla is deach mar dalta lá amháin agus Commodore 64 eici agus bhí sé sin mar bhunas an scéal, ach ní hílam ggóil sé sin fíor mar de réir Marianne bhí Priscilla an ó bhunas an grúpa, agus mar sin níor tháinig si is deach mar dalta. Agus de réir Williams héin níos moille na sin a ní hílann sé ggóil sé fíor fásta. Agus mar sin níl mór an freagraí agén ach an scéal a chreidim mé héin na gur ban tras i Priscilla, agus sin go ddíra an fá go raibh ahanrod faoi rún eici agus nach bhfuil éon greengraph an bhfuil si an. Agus tá an scéal seo go ddíra ag beirt duine a bhí an ag an am fásta. Candida Crew Irishoir ón Daily Telegraph a bhí an ag scríú scéal an Sisterhood.
Flickered under her chin, and I was absolutely freaked out because I suddenly realised that Miss Langridge was a man.
Candida is adamant about this, but says the paper wouldn't let her print it, saying she couldn't prove it.
Agus comaic lei sin Sophia ban óg a bhí ag obair mar cálín tí sa te fear cúpla méasa.
Sophia describes Priscilla as being trans or intersex, and as I said before, in a small village in 1980s Ireland, a deeply conservative place, This perhaps explains why Priscilla turned her back on photographs and sometimes wore a veil, though this only added to the mystery and fueled speculation and rumour about her real identity.
Agus mar áhar amháin eile sola gurí mé tús leis an cluiche é héin. Mé héin ag arc ar an scéal seo mar gamer in áit mar iriseoir. Sílim go mé abalta arc ar cajé atá an sa cluiche a chur an álas dúin faoin scéal agus faoin cultas. Agus an príomh rud a thug mé fadéir na sa tríú páirt den cluiche tá Darwin agus Freud agus Karl Marx an mar náméid nó mar demons sa scéal. Agus sílim go bhfuil sé sin buinte le natúramaí atá ag an cultas, go bhfuil siad go thomlann in an dóin nua amseartha agus go bhfuil siad ag éirí ahanrod nua amseartha a hacinnt agus mar sin dé tá Darwin agus Freud agus Marx an mar náméid mar thur siad san tús leis an dóin nua amseartha atá agin. Ach mar sin curí mé tús leis an cluiche anois. Anois seo é an cluiche Jack the Ripper é héin. Tá an cluiche seo I méarla ar nói agus mar sin bé mé ag léamh agus ag caint den chuideas mó I méarla sa bhart seo den fisin. The year was 1888. The day, I shall never forget it, August the 31st. There was no swirling pea soup fog reducing the gas lamps to yellow blurs hanging in a cold grey sky. On the contrary, it was a mild night following an exceptionally warm evening. It had been a splendid summer, and we seemed set for a pleasant autumn. If anything, these conditions increased rather than diminished the horror of the events that followed. Certainly they left me all the more unprepared, as if one could ever be prepared for such vile and unnatural evil. I was at the Whitechapel Road end of Brady Street. The street led north and south, while Bucks Row cut off to the west. Anois go west. Tá tú ábalta WES na scríú in áit west, north agus early. I turned west down Bucks Row. It was an hour when few respectable folk were abroad and a part of town where they seldom ventured. Neither of these things concerned me unduly, for I considered that I was well able to look after myself. I had just passed a pub called the Roebuck. Its doors were closed and its windows dark, though I knew the regulars would still be gathered about the bar. I was passing a dark and rather grim-looking alleyway when, to my surprise, I saw a man emerge from it. A man of the type one would least expect to see coming from that alley at that time of night. He was dressed in a dark city suit. He was slightly built, almost delicate in appearance. He wore a small goatee beard and a smile which was at once pleasant and even seraphic in its innocence, and yet carried a hint of something degenerate, like a picture of an angel upon a rotting and worm-eaten canvas. I saw his face for but a moment, yet it has remained before my eyes days and nights since that time, though heaven knows I have since seen sights far more obviously terrible which might have driven it from my mind. I was in Bucks Row, which led east and west. An alley ran south. The man was walking briskly off to the west. Go south. Because if you follow him in that scene the other way, he just kills you and it's game over right away. So I learned that part already, hence go south instead. I had turned south into a narrow alley between two rows of houses. It led nowhere but ended in a high blank wall. The first thing to strike me was the stench of the place. It was an unpleasant organic smell, quite unlike anything I had smelt before. It was not the odour of rottenness or putrescence. It was quite fresh, and somehow it was all the more horrible because of that. On the ground before me lay a dark shape whose form I could not make out, but which filled me with a nameless dread. Examine ship. Oh goodness, it's difficult to read this green on black without getting a headache from it, but I knelt down to examine the bundle. Already I half suspected that it was a human body, but in the gloom of that wretched alley it was hard even now to be sure. I could discern no face, but as my eyes became accustomed to the light, I realized what it was, or rather had been, a young woman. Her long skirt was pulled right up to cover the head. As I gently folded it back, I saw a sight which nearly caused my heart to stop. I saw not a woman's face, but the inhuman visage of some grinning fiend. A huge red mouth out of all proportion smiled at me in a horrible mockery of human happiness. For a moment I was frozen with terror, and then the yet more loathsome truth dawned upon me. This was no mouth but a ghastly gash, or rather two gashes, the first reaching from under the left ear to the centre of the throat, accompanied along half its length by a second which reached round under the other ear, leaving a wide and horrible hole and almost severing the head from the body. Eek, seo hé an fear go bhfuil 18 rating ag an cluiche mar sin. Instinctively I drew back, putting out a hand for support upon the body itself. To my horror and disgust I touched not solid flesh but a loathsome cold and slimy mass into which I sunk up to the wrist. My eyes now quite acclimatized, I saw that the whole of the stomach had been laid wide open and my hand wallowed in a mass of blood and vital organs, not warm but not quite cold. As you may imagine, it took me more than a moment to recover my composure. I took stock of my surroundings. Both ground and walls of that narrow place were spattered with blood from the insane ferocity of the assault. Looking about, I observed a bloody knife, a crumpled piece of paper, and a very small piece of paper. Mar sin Tori Mudge na Harry Shaw ar an talú. Take crumpled paper. Take knife. August. Take small paper. Into small paper. Small piece of paper. Put crumpled paper in pocket. Martian or Island. Go north. I turned and fled from that dreadful place. As I emerged from the alley, I found myself suddenly brought to a halt by a massive form and an iron grip. I had rushed pell-mell into the arms of a burly policeman. My next action was, I am now aware of it, foolish in the extreme. Panic seized me, and with a single blow I knocked the constable to the ground and took to my heels, but not before he had managed to shine his lantern in my face and get a good look at me. I made my way home as if the devil were on my heels. At first I seemed to be safe, but then I heard the sound of running footsteps behind me. I increased my speed. The narrow street seemed to arch over me. A ghastly hag barred my way, her face horribly disfigured by the marks of some vile disease. I pushed her aside and she fell violently upon the pavement. Her head smashed open and her brains spilled out on the cobbles. Eek, man is not having a good evening. I stopped, shocked, a terrible mistake, for at once my pursuers were upon me. I was surrounded by policemen. The policemen ringed me around and backed me against a wall. They drew their truncheons and then one of them started to laugh. It was a laugh with no mirth in it, a hateful, bitter laugh. The others joined in. Their red mouths opened wider and wider, dripping with saliva and then with blood, until I saw that they were not mouths at all, but awful, jagged gashes in their throats. I awoke, cold and damp with perspiration. I was on my bed, fully dressed, where I had flung myself last night. It had been a dream, but not all the terrible events of that night were dreams. Would that they were. My knuckles were skinned where I had struck the constable. I was in my room. It was small but comfortable and quite adequate to my present needs. The morning sun was streaming in through the sash window, making the paintwork gleam on the door to my west. Looking about, I observed a clock on the wall, my bed, a fine carved table, a washstand, an occasional table, and a cord hanging from the ceiling. Anish. Take small paper and read it. This is what we recovered from the body. Lady Maybank, 17 Sloane Square, London. And that's important because that's a clue for where you have to go later. So you have to read that now to know that. And on piece of paper, Ella, take crumpled paper and read it. Dear Miss Nichols, you do not know me, nor I you, yet it is my duty to warn you that your life is in fearful danger. I beg you to flee London at once. If you are in need of financial assistance to do so, my address is enclosed. I considered my next move. Anish, much Fanacht, get the bug. And this is an interesting part of this game that wasn't in a lot of text adventures of this era, that it's real time. So sometimes you say wait, or you have to say wait and wait for the actual real world time to go on, which wasn't in a lot of games of that era. I heard a sudden shuffling sound in the room. My nerves screamed. It was only my daily Times being pushed under the door. Take Times and read it. There was a horrible account of last night's murder. I felt sick and was about to stop reading when I saw a passable sketch of myself above the words suspected murderer. Beneath it, it said, artist's impression of the ruffian discovered at the scene. He has assaulted a constable, is probably armed and certainly dangerous. Anish na ruddy Alice a Shomra. Examine occasional table. I spelt that wrong. I hope it works. Oh, it did work. Upon the occasional table, I saw an ocarina. Okay, well, we don't need that. Examine washstand. A bar of soap, a cutthroat razor, and a jug of water, and a looking glass. Look in mirror. I saw a handsome young man with an imperial beard and mustache. It was I. Well, that part's important because we need to remember to change our appearance when we were seen. And talking about covering it up. Hide knife under bed. I put the bloody knife in the murky depths under my bed. Okay. Wash. I did so. Examine carved table. Upon the fine carved table, I saw a steel pen and an ink bottle. Nish the cord from the ceiling. Pull cord. I heard a faint jangling. Get sheets. I was now holding the crumpled sheets. There was a knock at the door and a maid entered with a jug. She said, "Nice morning, sir," and exchanged my jug of cold water for a steaming hot one. She looked at me a little queerly as she left. She's read the newspaper. Anish Kawilmaj. I have the sheets, so tie sheets together. This is our escape plan from the room, because if you try to leave by going down the stairs, the police get you right away, so you need to have an escape route out the window. I tied the sheets together and knotted them firmly to the iron bedstead. Take knife. I was now holding the bloody knife. It's important that you hid that under the bed before the maid come in so she didn't see it, so now you can take it out again. Now that she's gone. Take pen and bottle. So we're holding those. Examine bottle. Normal ink bottle with a hinged metal lid. The ink had dried up. Examine pen. Sharp nibbed steel pen. And that's going to be useful in a minute, because we can use it now to open a little secret compartment on the knife. Examine knife carefully. It had a pair of compasses and a twisted serpent engraved upon the blade. Close to the pommel of the handle was a narrow slot less than 1/4 of an inch long. So that's what we need the pen for now, to open that. Insert nib in slot. As I pushed the nib into the slot, there was a click. The pommel opened and a thing like a bead rolled out into my hand. Examine bead. It was at once the most curious and the most dreadful thing I had ever seen. Within the glass-like sphere was a tiny face of unutterable malevolence, a greyish flesh colour, and absolutely perfect in every detail, if such ugliness can be called perfection. But the horror of it was that it was alive. It leered and grimaced at me, its eyes continually blinking and its lips working constantly as if mouthing inaudible blasphemies. Eesh. I was in my own room. It was small but comfortable, and quite adequate to my present needs. The morning sun was streaming in through the sash window, making the paintwork gleam on the door to my west. Looking about, I observed a clock on the wall, some crumpled sheets, my bed, a fine carved table, and this is the same stuff as before, so we'll head on next. So we want to take that bead with us, so put bead in bottle. I was able to get the thing into the bottle and close the lid upon it. I fastened the little hasp upon the lid and prayed that my little ink bottle had the virtue of those bottles in the Arabian Nights. He's put a genie in the bottle. Take pillow and razor. We're going to put a cut in the pillow with the razor and use that to hide the bead in to throw it out the window with us. Cut pillow with razor. I cut a deep slit in the pillow. Put bottle in slit. Into lock door and shave so we don't get recognized with our imperial mustache. I took a last look at my jolly old imperial, then proceeded with a sigh to shave it off. Now back to our escape. Throw pillow out of window. And we'll drop everything else. Drop all. Put down everything we're carrying. Climb down sheet. I climbed out of the window. It was both noisier and more time. Oh, that went on by itself. Weird. I was in a small walled garden. The side walls were too high to see over, but the back wall to the east was a little lower. I heard a violent crashing above me, as if the door of my room were being battered down. Oof, we got out just in time. Looking about, I observed a pillow and a late flowering rose. And we want the pillow then. Take pillow. I picked up the pillow and, removing the bottle from it, let it fall. Now we want to go east. Clambering over the wall, I found myself in a dingy back alley. I ran helter-skelter down a maze of similar alleys where the sun hardly reached until noon. Sometimes I paused, listening for sounds of pursuit, but heard none. At last I emerged, far from home, into a main street. I was on a broad sunny street. It was a fine morning. Cabs rattled past, and early risers, by my usual standards, were about their business. A constable stood on the street corner talking to a young maidservant. He glanced at me. Right, we want to call a cab. And we want to give him the address that we read on the piece of paper. So And an important part here that took me a while to figure out is that to write quotation marks on the Spectrum, it's not the modern keyboard quotation marks, it's you hold right shift and press P. If you do the regular quotation mark button, it puts in something that looks like a kind of zero sideways, which doesn't work. So I was stuck at this part for quite a while until I found somewhere explained that to me. So right shift and P to do that. The cabbie whipped up the horses and we were off along the London streets to Sloane Square. I sat back with a heartfelt sigh of relief. After a while I became aware that the cab was moving remarkably quickly. A particularly fierce jolt nearly shook me out of my seat. I leaned out to shout at the cabbie. A rush of cold air tore the words from my mouth. I had to hang on to the side of the cab for support. A wild fear seized me. Was I being abducted and taken to the man I had seen in the alley? The thought made my mouth suddenly dry. Or had the cabbie somehow recognised me? Was he taking me to Scotland Yard? Oh, well, let's get out of here. Jump. Oops. Spelled that wrong. Will work. Oh, good. I like that about this. Sometimes if you have little typos, it still guesses what you meant. That's nice and not always the case in games of that era too. I determined to jump out. With luck, I would not break my leg. Without it, I was already lost. I looked up and down the street. Another cab was hurtling toward us. Had a madness seized all cabbies that day? The poor beast drawing it had foam around its mouth, dribbling onto the road. Its yellow eyes were rolling wildly. We would surely collide. The cab overturned. I was thrown violently to the side, my arm twisting under me. I heard a dreadful, inhuman sound. It was a long minute before I realised that the horses were screaming. Hey, poor critters. Climb out. As I pushed open the door above my head and scrambled out, a boy's voice screeched, "Look out, mister!" and I turned to see a horse's hooves flashing in the air. The next moment there was a sickening crunch and blackness flared from behind my eyes. A wave of dizziness and nausea swept over me. I was in a carpeted corridor beside an ornate-looking glass. The air was scented with tobacco smoke and lavender polish. There was a door to the west. Some intangible impersonality in the atmosphere suggested that I was in a hotel or gentleman's club. I vaguely remember the accident in the cab. When had it been? I could not seem to recall. I considered my next move. Let's check where we are. My own features seemed blurred and indistinct, but I could see the reflection of a room through the half-open door. A tall elderly gentleman with a shock of white hair carelessly combed was referring to a small red book and twisting a dial on the wall. That part's important because we need to get into that safe he's looking at. He turned to speak to someone. As this other man came forward, I could scarcely suppress a gasp of horror. It was the man from the alley. Then the door was closed and I saw no more. Fambo, my chuckly. Your horses a minute. Let's see what we have. You can type inventory at any time to see what you're holding. I had at that time the sober uniform of a high-class servant which I was wearing. Okay, so nothing too useful there. We'll go to the west first. I had barely entered when an unseen voice barked, "Leave us at once." I stepped backwards automatically and the door was closed in my face. So we'll go back for now. I wandered around feeling strangely dazed and eventually found myself back where I had come from. Now this part you have to make use of the real-time feature in the game because we need to get into that room, but we need to wait until they leave first. So you can either actually wait like in real time or you can just keep typing wait a few times like this. A group of men left the room, passing me without a glance. And now we go west into the room. I was in a room of classic proportions, its high ceiling embellished with plaster, curlicues, and its vast fireplace ornamented with gilded cherubs. Above the empty hearth was a large canvas, Delacroix's Liberty Directing the People. Smaller paintings were hung around the room. Looking about, I observed a mahogany table and a roll-top desk. So we'll examine the big painting. This painting portrayed a scantily clad woman bearing a bayoneted rifle and the new flag of France and leading an armed mob over a pile of broken bodies. Foreshadowing, because something to do with the French Revolution will be coming up as a clue soon. Next, other paintings. Examine small paintings. The other paintings were a set of 5 gruesome scenes, somewhat in the style of Peter Bruegel the Younger. Each had a small brass plaque on the lower edge of its frame. I'll read plaques to find out what they are. The titles were The Triumph of Hell, The Joys of the Damned, The Exaltation of Lucifer, The Catafalque, and The Demonic Banquet. Now, the one we want to look behind to find the safe is The Exaltation of Lucifer. So look behind The Exaltation of Lucifer. Behind the painting was a brass dial, Shingojira. Open desk. It was locked. Okay, that's fine for now. Examine fireplace. On the mantelpiece, I saw a row of dolls. Examine dolls carefully. I saw a Scottish doll, a French doll, and a baby doll. Get French doll. I was now holding the French doll. Examine French doll carefully. The porcelain French doll wore a blue silk and lace gown with a piled up white wig hairstyle. It reminded me of the pictures of Marie Antoinette. And there's our clue, because how we get the key is exactly what they did to Antoinette. Behead French doll. The painted head popped off easily. Look inside. It was too dark inside the doll to see anything, but I turned it upside down and a small key fell out. That's exactly what we're looking for, so now we can unlock the desk. Lock desk and examine it. Within the roll-top desk, I saw a red book. Take red book. I was now holding it. Okay. Right. Wonder will that work? Nope. Read. The red book was full of names and addresses, some of them familiar to me from the Times. On the back page was a row of figures, and this is the combination for the safe. So L at start means left 34, R after that means right 98. So we'll do that now at the safe. Turn dial left to 34. Turn dial right to 98. Turn dial left to 90. Turn dial left to 13. And turn dial right to 57. The dial swung away from the wall, revealing a square cavity. Examine cavity. Within the open safe, I saw a large black book. So let's have a look at that. is now holding it. Examine it. The large black book had a silver circle with a silver dot at its center marked on the front cover. So let's read it. The book was not written in English. Odd geometrical figures dotted the text. I could make little of it. Pasted in were some coloured anatomical drawings and a map of the Whitechapel area. Over the map was superimposed a complex esoteric diagram in red ink. August 31st, Mary Ann Nichols, suddenly leapt up at me from the page. It was part of a list of names and dates. Below it was the date, September 8th. No name. No name yet, said some inner voice. A wave of dizziness and nausea swept over me. Eh, governor, open your mince pies. Struth, I never knew such a sound kipper. I came to myself to find a harried cabby shaking me. The cab was undamaged. Had it then been all a dream, or had I truly been elsewhere in another's body? I had alighted opposite number 17. As the cab drove off, I saw a tall and strikingly beautiful lady emerge from the house. On the other side of the square, I saw a man with a pistol taking aim to shoot her. So we want to save the woman. Jump in front of lady. I placed myself between the lady and her assassin in the very instant that the shot rang out. I felt something like a blow on the chest. It did not hurt at the time. There were clouds in front of me. No, I was on my back. The assassin was running away. The lady was kneeling beside me, her cool hand on my brow. She was saying something. Her voice seemed to come from far away. There was a trace of some strange accent. He has it. May the good God be thanked. Now we have at least a chance to defeat the powers of darkness. She placed a kiss upon my forehead, and I fell into a slumber. The last words I heard were, "When you wish to awake, call Hermione." End of part 1. And that last line she said, "Call Hermione," that's like a way when the games came on separate discs or cassettes, whenever you put the second one in, if you typed "Call Hermione," that was your way of like loading a save from scratch, basically, to tell it that you had completed the first part. Agus sin é don páirt a hain. Agus inis páirt a dá don cluiche. I felt a gnawing pain in my chest, as if a rat had eaten its way into my body and was burrowing its way slowly but certainly through my flesh, bones and muscles toward the heart. Suddenly I could stand it no longer. I plunged my hand deep into the open wound, and clenching my teeth, I grasped the vicious little creature firmly in my hand. It squealed and struggled, every movement making me sick with pain, but at last I wrenched it forth. It was not a rat. The thing I held in my hand was a grotesque human head with no body. Its hideous mouth dripped with blood. Strings of sinew torn from my body dangled from its teeth. It looked at me and laughed. I closed my hands on the evil thing, squeezing tighter and tighter until it let out an ungodly shriek. I went on squeezing until its nose burst. Its skull cracked and its brains oozed out over my hands. Silence at last. I fell back, perspiring profusely, horribly sick, but no longer in pain. The film Alien came out a few years before this game was written. I wonder, was it an influence on that scene? Acher Eileen. The fever abated. I awoke. No, I did not awaken. I was hovering in that feverish borderland. Anish Cahimuj on Pasokal Akuristja Hermione. From the end of part 1, I called out the name. At least I tried to call it. My voice was no more than a whisper that fell away into silence. Yet within moments I heard a rustling of the skirts and then the swish of the curtains. A light fell upon my face, and I opened my eyes to see a pretty young girl, dressed as a maidservant. Yet somehow I felt that she was rather more than that. The girl spoke. "Do not exert yourself." She helped me to sit up against my pillows. "Just sit here quietly," she said. She left me. Up. I staggered unsteadily to my feet. I was in a predominantly blue room. The ceiling was very high and the room large. There was a rich carpet on the floor of oriental design. There was a bedside cabinet and a great four-poster bed. And open cabinet and look in it. I did so. In the bedside cabinet I saw a dumpy bottle. Take bottle and drink brandy. I'm running the commands together in this one because there's a limit on how many commands you can write before you get an instant game over from failing at the end of this one. That's why I'm writing two things together in one line rather than separately as I did in part one. I found myself on a narrow landing. And out. So go D for downstairs. I was on the south end of the house. Go north. August north or east. And now to the south was the massive oak door. So examine door. There was a white button. So we want to press the button. A bell rang within. So we'll go in. I was at the north end of that. So we'll go east. I was in a dark cupboard surrounded by brooms, mops, pails, and devices of like nature. It had the unmistakable smell of a broom cupboard. I heard the front door open, followed by footsteps from the porch, as if someone had stopped to investigate. So we'll go west here. I was at the north end. So we'll go south. Stairs led up, so we'll go U for up. I found myself on a narrow landing, so we'll go west one more time. This was evidently a lady's bedroom. It was decorated in a tasteful pink. The large bed had a pink coverlet and a lady's nightdress folded on the pillow. A massive wardrobe stood in one corner, and a scent of violets pervaded the room. So let's see what's in the wardrobe. Inside was a great array of voluminous dresses in every colour. Among them, looking rather out of place, hung the morning suit in which I had arrived. So take suit and wear it again. I'm trying to minimize the number of commands, alright? I was now wearing the morning suit. So back out, found myself on a narrow landing. So now we're going to go up to the attic of the house. Pardon me. I was in an attic chamber. The walls were lined with heavy chintz curtains of a dark maroon, and very little light found its way in. At the centre of the room stood a small velvet-covered table, upon which various objects were now placed very exactly, as if laid out for a ritual of some sort. Okay, so we'll want to look what's behind the curtain. Behind the curtains, the walls were lined from floor to ceiling with ancient books upon arcane and esoteric lore. So we'll examine the books. One in particular caught my eye. It had a leather marker in it which seemed to have been placed there recently. I heard Hermione return to her room. So I'll have a read at that book. Take book and read it. The book was handwritten and seemed to be some sort of working notebook. The final page read, "At last I have discovered the exact position of the demon in relation to the crystal, and of the crucifix in relation to both. By tracing the word veritas upon the surface of the water, I can now see a little within the mists of this dreadful business." So that's our clue for what to do to find the location. Veritas, for those who don't know Latin, is the Latin word for truth, so we're tracing that in the water. A tremor seemed to run between the three objects on the table. So now we'll look in a crystal ball to see what the clue is. The mists within the crystal parted to reveal a white and terrified face, shrieking in hideous silence. The lips and cheeks were drained of all colour, the eyes mere white orbs, seeming to gaze on infinity, the light of life swiftly fading away. Ufasa. As the face vanished into the mists again, a street sign, Hanbury Street, appeared, then a clock saying 1:52, which was suddenly covered by a curtain of blood. When the blood cleared, the clock said 6:20, and I saw hundreds of people in the grip of some insane panic, rushing in every direction and screaming. So that's our clue, Hanbury Street. Whenever we get back downstairs to the street, that's where we need to tell the cab to go. So back downstairs. I'll just rush through this part because I'm basically retracing what I did before, but in the opposite direction, back downstairs. So down twice, then north 3 times. Now, I was in Sloane Square. A number of cabs stood nearby waiting to be hailed. Roads led off in all directions. So, I'll hail the cab. Where to, Gov? Asked the cabbie. So, say to cabbie, Hanbury Street. The cab rattled through the streets and finally deposited me at my destination. I was in Hanbury Street. Phew, I did it in time. We get a game over screen here if you take too many commands, so I made it. I took a few steps down the street. As I feared, there was someone, or something, sprawled upon the pavement. Before I could bring myself to look upon the corpse, I noticed something which filled me with a strange sense of horror. Laid out neatly on the ground were 2 polished brass rings and 2 new farthings. They had not fallen by accident, but had been deliberately arranged. Already somehow I knew enough to realize that this detail carried an evil significance, perhaps even nastier than what was to follow. I turned to the corpse. The woman was laying on her back. Her left arm rested on her left breast, and there was something piled on her shoulder. At first I could not, or would not, see what it was. Then I realized that it was the woman's intestines, still attached by a bloody cord to the inside of the body, where the stomach had been cut open. They lay piled in a half-congealed heap on and above the woman's shoulder, their blood mingling with that from her gashed throat. Yes, Christ. Then I saw something else, something I could not bring myself to believe. Whether it was an hallucination caused by loss of blood, or whether my glimpse into the crystal had opened some inner sight, I could not say. But beside the body I saw something resembling a deep pool of mist, and felt myself being drawn towards it. I was sucked downwards and saw the gaunt face of the man whom I had seen at the place of the first murder. A suave voice said, "Farewell, meddler." I was at the bottom of a brick-lined shaft. The only apparent exit was many yards above me and closed by a heavy iron grill. A body appeared to be slumped in one corner. The pain in my chest had vanished. So, Anish, we want to go northeast. I was in a long east-west corridor lit by the flickering flames of black candles. So we have another bit of walking to do here. So, west, before a tall iron door. In front of it stood an odd little man dressed in red. So back the way again, east. I was facing a tall brass door. Before it stood a queer little man dressed in blue. Oh, let's go that way. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, Lady Maybank was standing before me. "Listen carefully," she said, "for I cannot stay long. One of those odd little men is named Rendlewise. The other has no name. One of them always tells the truth, the other always lies, but I do not know which is which. Rendlewise guards the door which will lead you to me. The other guards a door which will open to your destruction. You may ask only one question of only one of the men, and that question must contain only 3 words. Do not leave this place until you are certain. So we have a riddle to solve here. She touched my hand, and I realized that it was the first solid thing that I had touched since I had fallen down the shaft. How doubly strange, then, that she should vanish like a burst bubble without a trace. So the answer to the riddle is, say to man, does Rendlewise lie? So we ask him, does he lie? And that will give us the answer to the question. Oh, what did I say wrong there? Do I have to go back west to see him? Oh, I do. Go Maleshko. I had to go back outside to see him. I was standing before a tall iron door. The front of it stood an odd little man. Okay, so I had to go back outside there. I forgot about that part. Does Rendlewise say to man. The input speed is slower on these Spectrum emulators, so that's why I need to force myself to slow down, otherwise I end up making mistakes by going a letter or two ahead. The little man grinned and said yes. So there's our answer to that. I now knew which was the correct door. What now? Go east. I was in the long east-west corridor again. Go east. I was facing a tall brass door, so this is the guy. Go east again. I passed through the door into a high room. At the far end of the room was a raised platform. On the platform was a life-sized cross formed from iron girders, and tied to the cross was Lady Maybank. Ugh. I rushed forward to free her, but could touch neither her nor the cross. It is no use, she said. You are not in your body. You can touch nothing physical. You could touch my subtle body when I sent it to you, but I cannot stay out of my body for long. But you can. You are one of the gifted. I stood enthralled as she continued. That is the one thing they have not counted upon. They captured me as I tried to prevent the murder. They no doubt left you for dead in some stinking hole, but your subtle body is free to wander through their inner world of darkness. We shall not yet discover the full truth of their scheme. We shall yet discover the full truth of their scheme and perhaps destroy it. You mean there is some purpose in all this madness? I asked doubtfully. Human sacrifices of such elaborate ritual are not carried out without purpose. They are carefully organized. Nor are they done in public places merely for sport. The mass panic evoked by this ripper is the means by which black magical energies, generated by the sacrifices, are spread through the soul of the people. These people are bent upon changing the very course of history. But what can I do? I cannot even touch anything. You cannot touch physical things, but you can touch subtle things. Beneath this triangular section of London now known as Whitechapel, there lies another city, a city which cannot be seen with eye or touched with hand. It has been built over many centuries by dark magic, magic which is reaching its climax in these dreadful sacrifices. You will enter that city. You will penetrate its evil heart and wrest its secrets from it. I shall help you when I can. Are you ready? I am ready, I said. Then do exactly as I say. And when I command you to speak the word of power, say, Kerugma. Agus sin an pásokal don parcha tree, Kerugma sin focal gregish a Killian chakdrach no gospel kind of message Bejer and Astrakan Carter no rub mar sin. At Caberby I lin goji parcha tree. Agus inéis parcha tree This part is very different. It's more like esoteric and more like a traditional high fantasy type of adventure and really nothing at all to do with Jack the Ripper. But it's also an interesting part in terms of telling us something about the group, the Silver Sisterhood, who made it, because there are parts where like Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx are cast as villains, which is to do with their view on modernity being a bad thing and looking to return to a time before that. So there's aspects of that in here too. Kabirby, but anyway, we shall carry on with it for now. I want you, said Lady Maybank, to walk right through me. I was taken aback. They have placed me here as a barrier between the planes of darkness and the physical world. Pass through me and you shall begin your journey into the darkness. Obediently I stepped into her, so that her physical body and my subtle one occupied the same space. At once everything changed. The world was pink and gentle, sunshine filtered gently from a pink sky, and everything was pervaded with a subtle scent of roses. Rivers flowed with sweet milk, and every living thing seemed young and unafraid, as if it were newborn into a world of unconditional love. I knew that I was somehow within the very self of Lady Maybank, walking, as it were, amid the essence of her feminine soul, encompassed by the flowers of her purity. I heard her voice, sweet yet commanding. It reverberated through the hills and the woodlands. It echoed across the skies as if this whole land were addressing me, as I suppose it was. Come, come, she cried. You must not tarry here. Speak the word of power. And this is the password we were given at the end of part 2, Kerugma. The pink landscape faded about me. The warm embrace of Mother Sunshine cooled and darkened? Dankened? Not sure if that's a word. I'll say darkened to a damp and cheerless chill. The brightness and lightness gave place to a sense of darkness, mass and overbrooding weight. My heart seemed to shrink within me. I put out my hand and knew that I was once more among things that I could touch and that could touch me, for my hand was stopped by something cold and hard and utterly unyielding. I was in an immense chamber which seemed to be the combined work of nature and of architecture. Massive stalagmites descended from the ceiling at least 100 feet above me. At the top there were but virgin rock. Some dozen yards down they began to be rough-hewn until, as they reached the ground, they were fluted columns, smooth and polished, yet still oppressive in their weight and blackness, as if the hand that shaped them was more sombre and more brooding than the ancient rock itself. The rough stone to east and west was polished to form smooth black walls here below. So we'll go S for south. The chamber narrowed here and the columns grew less massive. Finally it diminished to a small impassable crack. So we want to climb a column here to get a key. I ascended the pillar without any sense of physical effort, as if in a dream. I was perched atop the pillar on the white surface of the cornice. Above me it ceased to be a pillar and was a rough, unclimbable stalagmite. At my feet I saw a small silver key. Get key. I picked up the small silver key. So we'll examine it. It had a curious quality. It seemed less a real key than a symbolic image of all the keys inserted in all the locks in dream and in adventure since time began. So we'll do back down the column, D for down. The chamber narrowed here and the columns, okay, that's the same text as before, so we'll look in the crack this time. Peering into the crack, I discerned a mask of crystal and bone. Okay, so we'll get back to the masks later. For now, we'll go north to use the key. I was in an immense chamber. Okay, that's the same as before. We're in the same room, so north again. I stood at the end of the black stone chamber, which terminated in a blank wall of polished stone with intricate carvings upon it. examine carvings. The carvings were of various symbols, triangles and squares, an inverted pentacle, a pair of dividers, all entwined in the sinuous, leafless tendrils of some creeping plant. These symbols sprawled over the whole wall, but most densely at its central part, where they formed the shape of an arch. So let's examine the arch. Looking more closely at the arch-shaped carvings, I saw that they concealed a continuous incision in the stone, so that it would seem that a section of the wall was in fact a close-fitting, ingeniously carved door. Having discovered this, I noticed that one tendril of the plant formed a strange spiral shape, and that at the center of the spiral, cunningly camouflaged by the design, was a keyhole. So that's where we use the key that we found before. Open door. The door swung silently open as soon as it was unlocked, and though it looked as though it weighed a ton, at least it moved freely on its hinges at the lightest touch. Whether this was due to superb engineering or to the fact that weight in this place was not what it is elsewhere, I could not tell. North. I was in a garden with neatly clipped lawns and paths leading to the center from all four quarters. At the center stood a little pedestal in the style of a Grecian column. It seemed that it should hold some object of great importance, but in fact it had nothing upon it. Behind me to the south was a tall wrought iron gate set in an arch in a high wall. Through the gate I saw hills and fields. I wondered how such a garden might grow underground, and how the sunlight which shone so brightly could be here in what I took to be a cavern beneath the streets of Whitechapel. I wondered, indeed, what light it was that had made me able to see in the other chamber without lamp or candle or other light, which one might expect to need upon such an adventure. Looking up, I saw a clear blue sky and a sun with a smile upon its face, encircled by rays, alternately straight and wavy as in a child's drawing or a medieval picture. I heard a clang as the gate swung shut and locked behind me. So let's have a look through the gate. Through the ironwork of the gate I saw men at their labour in the distant fields. Okay, so we're going west here. The west path ended in a high wall in which there was a niche containing a statue. So examine statue. The statue was of a man with the head of an ant holding a book with faded lettering on the spine. The statue glowed with a strange luminescence that seemed at once benign and malevolent, as if the radiance of some good spirit were filtered through an evil substance. So let's read the lettering. So that's Das Kapital, Karl Marx's book. So he's the character here. So now we'll go east. In a garden with neatly clipped lawns and paths leading to the center room from all four quarters. At the center stood a little pedestal in the style... Okay, we've been here before. So I'll go north again. And same again, but we're facing the other way from the gate. And this is a different statue we're facing now. So we'll examine the statue again. This one was half man, half goat, with the leer of the most lecherous and degenerate satyr it is possible to imagine. It had a gold ring upon its finger and was holding a book with faded lettering on the spine. So I'll read the lettering again. It was hard to make out, but appeared to contain the word psychoanalysis. So this is Sigmund Freud, this one. So this time we have one more statue to look at. We'll go south. And that's the same text again. So, and here we are in front of the third statue. It was a statue of an ape with the head of a man, holding a book with faded lettering on the spine. The statue glowed with a strange luminescence that seemed at once benign and malevolent, as if the radiance of some good spirit were filtered through an evil substance. So let's read the lettering again. So this is the origin of species. So this is Charles Darwin in this one. So this time we can move the statue. On the Darwin one, you can't on the other two, but on this one you can. I managed to move it aside, revealing a deep cavity beneath it. So examine cavity. I explored the shadowy depths of the cavity with my hand. It gave me an unpleasant sensation, as if I were plunging my arm into some unclean thing. Suddenly my fingers touched something and I pulled out a curious object. The statue had ceased to glow. So examine object. It was a fine silver egg fashioned in two halves which were hinged together at the centre. It lay open and empty, glowing with a gentle radiance which seemed wholly good. So we'll try closing the two sides. As I closed the egg, its glow seemed to grow stronger. And open egg. As I opened the egg, a golden yolk rolled out into my hand. So that yolk, by closing and opening the egg, is something we'll need for a puzzle soon. So we'll go back west here. And that's somewhere we've been before, so I won't read that again. So this time we'll examine the pedestal. The pedestal was made in the style of a carved and fluted Grecian column, and it twisted the carved figure of a serpent, holding an apple in its mouth. Upon the flat stone surface of the pedestal I saw a strange shimmering. Okay, so this is where the yolk from the egg is going to come in handy. Put yolk on pedestal. Whoa, flash of light. Good effect for the Spectrum era. I placed the golden yolk on the pedestal. There was a blinding flash. As my eyes cleared, I saw that the golden yolk was no longer there. In its place lay a mask of crystal and bone. So we'll take the mask. It was a strange and rather horrifying mask, formed of a pink-tinged glass which looked like and yet unlike human flesh. Beneath the glass were the lineaments of a skull wrought in bone, yet its proportions were horribly contorted in themselves and further distorted by the effect of the glass. The impression given by the whole was as if one could see through the flesh to the innermost being of a man. Yet what one saw was not the truth, but a grotesque and hideous parody. Interesting. Okay, so we'll try it on. Wear mask. As I put on the mask, my entire body was transformed, so that I appeared a ghoulish, half-transparent thing with a horrible, distorted skeleton visible through my flesh. Eek. Okay. So we'll go north again. Wrought iron gate, identical to that to the south. But above this gate was a niche in which a statue stood. In the presence of the mask of crystal and bone, the statue glowed darkly. Okay, so we'll open the gate. And north. Stone door of the type I'd seen before. Okay, north again. Ooh, severed head, lovely. I was in a hall lined with large glass bottles. To my horror, I observed that each bottle contained a severed human head preserved in a yellowish liquid. As one finds, I guess. Well, let's examine those. At first I thought that these were the heads of murdered men preserved in a terrible scientific equivalent of the practices of some savage tribe. Then I observed that many of the heads were those of notable men whom I knew still to be living. There was the distinguished naturalist Charles Darwin and the young Austrian physician Sigmund Freud. Yet there was also Karl Marx, a German political theorist whom I knew to be dead. These three seemed to dominate the others, with strange threads running from their bottles to every other bottle. The heads seemed to be silently speaking. Okay, so we'll go around and examine some stuff here. Come to a crossroads, so north again, the end of a black stone corridor, entrance to a garden barred by a grotesque ghoulish figure. The ghoul barred my way, crying, "I know you not, nor recognize your form. You may not pass into this domain." Okay, let's examine the ghoul. It was a shuffling, shambling creature, more ape than man. At first I thought it an ape about to become man, but then I saw that it was a man, stripped of all that made him human and descended to the condition of an ape. Okay, we'll go back around, back to the crossroads and look at the other ones. South first, then west, and west again, where there's another ghoul blocking our way, so examine ghoul again. It was a gross and lumbering figure crowned with a golden crown and strutting about in what was at once a clumsy attempt at regality and a contemptuous parody of it. Okay, so this time we go back east, east again, end of a corridor, grotesquely distorted skeleton covered by a half-transparent human flesh. Okay, east again. Found myself in another garden, where elegant ladies and gentlemen danced to the music of Johann Strauss. Suddenly I looked up and saw that hundreds of feet of rock appeared to have become transparent. Far above, the body I had found in Buck's Row lay sprawled and bleeding. The blood trickled into a chalice held by a goat man like the statue above the gate, and from the chalice it poured upon the dancers. At once they underwent a terrible transformation. I was in a garden surrounded by dancers who seemed to have become less than human. The music had changed from an elegant waltz to a pounding demonic beat, which rocked my very brain. Some women were half naked, others aped men in trousers. All seemed unkempt and degenerate beyond words, gyrating in time to the beat like savages about the cauldron. Some slunk off into the corners and copulated freely, like cats in an alley. All the time the beat grew wilder, the blood flowed faster, and the goatmen brayed in satanic mirth. My eyes were drawn to a well at the centre of the garden. Okay, so we'll go D for down that. I was in a black stone chamber where strange and abstract shapes flew wildly in all directions. It seemed like a madman's nightmare or the painting of a madman sprung to life, yet it seemed also a more abstract symbol of the chaos which reigned above. At the centre of the room, directly beneath the well shaft, was a small pedestal. So we'll examine this pedestal too. Rather like the other, except that there was no snake carved about it. Upon its surface was a recess the size and shape of an egg. So there is our clue. We will put the egg on the pedestal. Without the golden yolk, it is nothing. Okay, so as we'll remember from the start, we have to close the egg. As I closed the egg, its glow seemed to grow stronger. It felt as though the yolk had returned to the egg again. So we put it on again now that it's closed. Oh, there we go. The room seemed suffused in a golden light. I was in a room full of beautiful shapes and colours which seemed like the visible form of music. I was filled with a sense of harmony and completeness. Marble steps led upward. My horrible disguise fell away and I was myself again. Okay, so next we'll go back up. In the garden where they danced intricate and courtly dances to the strains of a music more ancient and more delicate than any I had ever heard. At my feet I saw a silver ring. So let's take the ring and have a look at it. It had a conjoined sun and moon engraved upon it. So we'll wear it. And we'll want to rub the ring. I found myself in a niche high above a garden which I recognized. Beside me and hogging the space in that rather small niche in the most considerate manner was a statue. At my feet I saw a glass pyramid. Okay, so the rings that are in this are going to be like a teleportation device that we use, both the silver ring and the gold ring, so that's going to be a lot of the next part of this. So we've used that, so let's examine this statue. Half man, half goat. Okay, we've seen him before, but it's the gold ring upon its finger that we're interested in. So we shall take the gold ring and examine it. Beneath the real gold ring upon the creature's finger was a painted one. I now had the real gold ring. I had a conjoined sun and moon. It had a conjoined sun and moon engraved upon it. Okay, so rather than keeping it, we want to throw that ring, and that's because of how it works as a teleportation device. So where we throw that, we can use the silver ring to teleport ourselves to that. But before that, we want to get the pyramid and examine it. The glass pyramid was very light and fragile. Inside the glass pyramid, a white dove seemed suspended in the air, a golden radiance about its head. From its beak descended a golden chain which touched a queen seated upon a throne, suspended a little lower. The queen seemed very beautiful and serene. From her hand several golden chains descended to a tiny city and its surroundings which stood upon the base of the glass pyramid. The chains touched each man and woman at work in forge or farm or workshop. It touched lord and labourer, mistress and maid, and all were peaceful and happy. Okay, so now that we've got that, we want to use the silver ring to teleport ourselves. So we rub silver ring. The path ended in a high wall in which was a tall wrought iron gate identical to that in the south, but above this gate was a niche in which a statue stood. At my feet I saw a gold ring. Okay, so now we want to take the gold ring. So we pick that up. We'll go south. Okay, so we're back in the place with the Grecian columns. So we'll open the gate. Same as before, and now we're going back south several more times. This is back where we came. Men's chamber with the columns, yep, same as before. And south one more time. The chamber narrowed here and the columns grew less massive. Finally it diminished to a small impassable crack. So here we want to drop gold ring into crack. So we'll be using the teleportation thing there. So now we'll go back north. Same again, north again. And open door. And north again. And we're back in this place on the other side of the gate with the Grecian columns. So now we'll stand on the pedestal. I felt a sucking sensation. The world seemed to turn inside out. Narrow confined space surrounded by rock on all sides. Light entered from a small crack to the north. To the west ran a narrow crevice. Okay, so we'll check that out to the west. Okay, crevice appeared to have no ceiling but extended upwards for at least 100 feet, ending in a small hole. At my feet I saw a wooden mask. So that's the important part here. We want to take wooden mask and examine it. The mask depicted a gross and coarse face wearing a golden crown. Okay, so we'll go back east now, and we'll rub the silver ring to teleport us again. Garden, okay, so I don't need to read that again. We're back in the place with the columns again. So we'll examine the pedestal. And same again, but we have the gold ring again. So we'll take gold ring and put it on pedestal. I placed the gold ring on the pedestal. There was a blinding flash. As my eyes cleared, I saw that the gold ring was no longer there. In its place lay a wooden mask. Okay. So we take the mask and stand on pedestal. Aim again, sucking sensation. The world seemed to turn inside out. Pardon me. And we're back at the crevice. So now we'll use the silver ring. In the garden, okay, we're back here. So at my feet I saw a small silver key, a glass pyramid, and a wooden mask. So we'll take all. So we've got those three things. And we'll also say take gold ring, which isn't listed, because we're, even though that's not listed, we're going to need that for later. We'll go north again, back to there, through the gate again, and north twice again to end up here. I was in a hall lined with large glass bottles. Okay, so this is us back in the severed head hallway. We go north one more time, and then west. The entrance to a garden was barred by a grotesque, ghoulish figure. Okay, so here we need to put on the mask and wear it. As I donned the mask, I felt my very being coarsened and at the same time swelled with a sensation of pride. I was filled at once with an insolent sense of independence and with an abject willingness to be dominated by any fad or notion that swayed others. I wonder, is this related to Karl Marx, this one? It sounds like it, certainly. Okay, so we go west. In the courtyard of a magnificent palace, I heard a smith whistling as he shod a horse and a dairymaid singing as she carried 2 pails of fresh and foaming milk supported by a wooden yoke. I saw footmen in brightly coloured livery and ladies in waiting resplendent in jewels and fine satin. From a high window of the palace I saw a beautiful princess surveying everything below her and smiling to see that all was so happy and peaceful. Suddenly, far above, I saw a hacked and bleeding body and blood dripping into a sacrificial cup, and all was changed. Suddenly madness seemed to seize all present. Smiths fell upon footmen with hammers and hot irons. Ladies in waiting screamed as milkmaids lashed them with their heavy buckets and chains. From within the palace came a horrible and shrieking of many voices. At last the princess was hurled from her tower and lay smashed upon the cobbles below. The sunshine ceased and a grey cold rain fell insistently upon everything. A man with the head of an ant poured the last drops of blood upon the crowd, whose frenzy had given place to a numb stupor, and laughed. I stood in a cold and dingy yard closed in by high walls with the iron spikes and barbed wire atop them. I saw lords and footmen, ladies and maidservants, all treading a treadmill like hamsters in a cage. They did not laugh nor smile, but only tread, tread, tread. The palace was gone, but on the rain-soaked paving stones I saw its inverted reflection as if it were still there. Jet black it was, and in the tower window where the princess had been, a coarse-faced man with a crown upon his head cracked a long whip, and looked, as if that were possible, even more miserable than the folk upon the treadmill. Well, that was quite a story. Okay, so, well, that manhole cover in the last line is our clue, so we'll move cover. I could not lift the cover, but managed to move it aside, revealing a deep black hole. Alright, so here we want to drop our ring in to let us teleport in there. I had dropped some 40 yards down into a dark brick chamber. At the centre of the chamber stood a stone pyramid some 6 feet high and about as wide at the base. Near the top, the pyramid was cut off so that it had no apex but only a flat square surface about the size of the base of that glass pyramid I had found. Above the surface, where the apex should have been, hovered a great ghostly eye, glaring balefully upon the world. Okay. Examine stone pyramid. Its symbols carved upon it similar to those about the hidden door. So I'll examine the eye. A phrase came into my mind, the pride of Lucifer. The eye made me shudder. So the part where it said that the top was the same as the base of the glass pyramid we found was a clue. So we want to put our glass pyramid on top of the stone pyramid. I was in a chamber filled with light. At its center was a great glass pyramid containing a much larger and more beautiful version of the scene which I had seen in the small one. I heard joyful singing from beyond a small round hole far above me. My horrible disguise fell away and I was myself again. Okay, so now we'll use our silver ring to go back. Garden with a beautiful fountain playing at the center. To my east was an open gateway, and to the west the garden rose sharply in a series of flowery terraces. There was a hole in the ground, and at my feet I saw a golden ring. Okay, so we want to go back up here. Ascended the terrace. All about me bustled men and maids. Some hewed wood and others drew water. Some looked after sheep. A little girl was feeding chickens, and a young woman washed a rich and beautiful dress at a stream. Their dress was plain and simple, but clean and very attractive. I tried to speak to them, but they could not hear or see me. A steep flight of steps led up to the next terrace. So up again. On this level many trees grew. The people were more richly dressed. Men carved fine figures in stone or worked in silver or in porcelain. Some bought and sold, and others wove at looms. Some women assisted the men in their work, or worked by themselves. Many of them spoke instructions at a little parapet, their gentle voices floating down to the terrace below. None, it seemed, had any awareness of me. Steps led both up and down. So I'll keep going up. The folk here were most elegantly dressed, and music floated up from flutes and harps that were being played below. The most comely of the people from below came and went, receiving what seemed to be jewels from the ladies and gentlemen, and carrying them below. I seemed to see men on fine white horses, and women singing with bright resplendent voices, yet none appeared conscious of my presence. Steps led up and down, and I also saw a small cavern to my west. So that's where we'll go, west. I stood on a small stone platform jutting out from a high rock wall. Below me was a sheer drop. Above me the rock climbed perpendicularly into darkness. I noted that evenly spaced iron staples driven into the rock wall formed a ladder, going both up and down. To my east, a hole in the wall let in a golden light. A clattering rumble filled the air and shook the very rock. So we'll go down here. At the bottom of the ladder, sheer wall surrounded me on all sides. At my feet, I saw an iron mask. So let's get the mask and have a look at it. It was the face of an ape, but no ape that ever existed. It was a half-human ape which seemed to have sprung from an imagination fed on iron and on coal smoke. Okay, so we'll go back up here. So this is us back at the top of that part. So up one more time. It was on an underground railway track. A train roared down the tunnel, passing right through me. A ladder of iron staples led down. I seemed unable to proceed up or down the track, but there was a hole in the wall to my south across the line. So that's where we want to go. A tall north-south passage. A tall lady dressed in white approached me, saying, "That ring is mine." She took the silver ring and disappeared. Well, that's the end of our teleporting for now. We'll keep going that way. Then a rough, rocky chamber with a hole in the center of the floor. Okay, so we'll examine the hole. The hole went a long way down. It ended in a narrow crevice which looked rather like the one in which I first found the wooden mask. So we'll drop mask into hole. The iron mask plummeted down into the hole. I heard a distant sound as it hit the bottom. Okay, so now we'll have to go around a bit. So back around here, north twice, then down, east, and this is just back the same way, so down, down. We're going the opposite way through the medieval people world, and now we're back to where our gold ring is again, so take gold ring. Okay, so this time we want to, the beautiful fountain mentioned, we want to examine fountain. Above the sparkling waters of the fountain floated a golden ball, not held aloft by the water but hovering a little above it. So we want to take that and examine it. It was very bright and very light. In fact, for its size, it was the lightest thing I had ever held. So like with the ring, we want to rub gold ball. I was in a garden with a beautiful fountain playing at the center. To my east was an open gateway, and to the west the garden rose sharply in a series of flowery terraces. There was a hole in the ground. At my feet I saw a silver ball. Okay, so we'll take the silver ball next. Picked up the silver ball. Beneath the ball I found a wisp of silver thistledown. Okay, so we'll drop the gold ball here. As I released the golden ball, it floated upwards and hovered some yards above my head. Okay, so we go back east now, east twice here, and then south twice, all lined, so we're back in here to the severed head part, and open door, so south twice again, and open gate, and and south again. And we're back here, but the golden ball floated gently to the ground at my feet. So that's where we want to be. So take gold ball. So we've got that now. Then we go south a couple more times. Immense chamber, which, okay, so this is back at the start. We're in this immense chamber again. South one more time to the impassable crack, but this time we have a way through that. So we're going to drop gold ring in crack. Okay, so now we go back north 2 times. Open door. Okay, and then north one more time. In the garden with the lawns and the Grecian columns again. Okay. And this time we'll put the silver ball on pedestal. There was a blinding flash. As my eyes cleared, I saw that the silver ball was no longer there. In its place lay a gold ring. For an instant, I saw a wisp of silver thistledown, which vanished as the gold ring touched it. So the thistledown here, I think, is like it's like a timer telling us how many moves we have left. So this is that's kind of a clue to not make any mistakes in this part. So we want to take the gold ring. Okay, so rub gold ball in a garden. Okay, so we're back there. So this time we'll drop gold ball. As I released, it floated upwards. Okay, so now stand on pedestal. And here we go again. Getting sucked up. And we go west once here. Narrow crevice at my feet. I saw an iron mask. So get iron mask. Okay, then we go back east. And here we have to wait for the gold ball to float back down. And this part was seriously rage baiting me the first time I tried this. I thought I had encountered a game-breaking bug, but I haven't. You just have to keep typing wait, and it doesn't tell you that you're doing the right thing until it's about 5 times. There we go. I felt a sucking sensation. The world seemed to turn inside out. Okay. I was in a garden with neatly clipped lawns and paths leading to the centre from all 4 quarters. At the centre stood... okay, well, we're in the same place, okay. Through the gate I saw hills and fields. At my feet I saw a small silver key, a gold ring, and a silver ball. Okay, so we take all, and we'll put the mask on. It was the face of an ape again. The one that looked like a kind of industrial revolution ape. My limbs grew heavy. My arms sagged until my hands nearly touched the ground. My mind grew dull and was filled with animal lusts and urges. I found it hard to remember my purpose in being here. Okay, so we'll go back north. Open gate. And now we'll keep going north again. 5 times we have to go north. And found myself in a garden where people walked by 2s and by 3s. About each glowed a golden aura which seemed to show that a human being is no mere bundle of flesh and bone, but a portion of the divine light clothed in bodily substance. Above them hovered an ape with the head of a man. He held in his hand a chalice, and I knew that he wished to destroy the golden auras of these people, to turn their graceful stance into a stooping shuffle, and their fine discourse into vulgar slogans, in short, to make them forget that they were anything more than clever animals. But his chalice was empty. I heard a scream far above, and I saw a black rope descending from the rock above. I seized the rope and began to climb up and up through the black innards of the earth. How long I climbed I cannot say, but at last I emerged into a tiny cramped room where I saw a sight that horrified me more than anything I had seen. Was it possible, I asked myself, for a person to explode? The walls of the hovel were strewn with flesh and blood. Strips of human meat hung from the picture rails, as in some satanic butcher's shop, while on a blood-soaked bed lay the body of a girl, her torso completely flayed, her stomach laid open, and her hand thrust deep inside. But worst of all was her face. The nose and ears had been ripped away, the skin was cut to ribbons. Only the eyes, clear and untouched, stared mutely out from what had once been a human countenance. I guess severed head again. Suddenly I saw Lady Maybank standing before me. Too late, she said, the deed is done, yet it is doubtful whether this could have been prevented. Now there is only one further blood sacrifice to be made, and their work will be complete. One further, I said, a dreadful foreboding creeping over me. Yes, Lady Maybank said, me. Is there nothing I can do? I cried. Lady Maybank went to the small bedside table and picked up a religious statue. The statue itself stayed where it was, but in her hand she held a spiritual image of it, the only part that she or I could touch. Herein lies the essence of all that was good and pure in that poor fallen girl. It was little enough, yet it was great, for it was the light that shone in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Take this, and with it destroy the world of dark corruption which lurks below, yet be sure you do not destroy yourself in doing so. With these words ringing in my ears, I felt myself falling down into the darkness. I was in a garden with neatly clipped lawns and... Okay, this is the same description. We're back in the Grecian columns place. All about me I perceived the forms of figures half human and half ape. Their subtle bodies had grown so gross that in this subtle place they were hardly visible. Somehow I sensed that these were the golden people who had seemed so beautiful before. Okay, let's examine the statue. The religious statue had now become almost life-size. It depicted the Blessed Virgin in a blue cloak, with her foot upon the head of a serpent. So this time we'll put the statue that we got on the pedestal. There was a blinding flash. As my eyes cleared, I saw that the religious statue was no longer there. In its place lay a golden ball. Oops. Press spacebar by accident. Take gold ball. Okay, now with that, we'll stand on the pedestal, and I think that's it. I felt a sucking sensation. I was in a narrow confined space, surrounded by rock on all sides. Light entered from a small crack to the north. To the west ran a narrow crevice. I heard a sound that was at once like a peal of thunder and like the singing of an angelic choir. Through the narrow crack came a slender shaft of light which illuminated that narrow place more brightly than the midday sun, and then the black stone walls melted away as if they had never been. I saw Lady Maybank tied to her cross. Her body looked tired and frail, but she smiled a smile of peaceful triumph. The iron cross vanished and she was free. What happened next, I have never been quite sure. I was conscious of nothing until I found myself sitting in Lady Maybank's parlour. I was solid flesh and blood again, but I was old. It did not shock me, it hardly even surprised me. I had seen too much. At least, I said, we have won. I fear not, she said, the evils you have seen will come to pass, a little more slowly than they would have, that is all. Then was it all in vain? Oh no, for now there is hope. The evil there shall be, but also the hope of redemption. You have grown untimely old and soon will die, but you will be reborn that you may be young for the conflict that shall come when I am old. I gazed at her young and lovely face, and at those calm, ageless grey eyes, and time and youth and age seemed to me nothing. She raised her glass of fine Venetian crystal, and I raised mine. Until then, she said, until then. The end. Well, sin Jeru Ashtok don scale mar Nero Jack the Ripper on ag Jeru on scale Corby. Sais Kivlinch idir Maihugus Olka Vions on Triu Parch Anius Monacro. Well, sin goro Mila Maihugi Vasave Garka Harja Tasulogum Gerwinshiv Salt as on Fishan August as on Cliha Simul August Ashja Shaw have you made Gamerchinu. Okay, Amor ag Harja Guji an Kader Ella Slán.